Beatmaker, and welcome to Lounge Ronin. All things, everything. And before we get into it, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. And please leave a comment with your thoughts below. And make sure to hit that like button, as that will help the channel grow. And on this episode, we're going to discuss ancient Hindu texts and quantum physics. Now, I do remember back in the day when I was the heyday of being able to do long division. So do not expect any mathematical advice or expertise from me. But I found this to be a very interesting topic, and it made me really think about, how much knowledge is, this is not necessarily discovered, but just rediscovered. And, when we look at ancient history, when we look at ancient civilizations, the other day we talked about, the Denisovans, and how, about 40,000 years ago, they were making, very, pristine, geometrically incredible jewelry. So we kind of have to ask ourselves, well, what type of, obviously you would need to have very skilled math, and you would need to be very disciplined in forms of math, especially if you don't have, measuring tapes and measuring rulers nowadays, as they probably didn't have to create, beautiful jewelry. You have to really kind of think about it like, well, who taught them the mathematical skills that would be required in order to create the tools to create such beautiful jewelry? And that's just something that, that kind of popped into my head as I was reflecting upon today's live stream. Because, when you look at the Denisovans, they looked like, they look kind of like more like cavemen. That's the only way I can make it to articulate it, so you guys can have a visual representation as to what I'm talking about. But what I'm trying to infer here is that when we look at these, these articles, and they talk about these, Hindu texts, this is during a much more advanced and, quote unquote, civilized era, if that's how you want to put it. So it just kind of makes me think about what these kind of implications mean as we learn more and more about the past, and more about these pre-sapien species of man, and how, we're learning more and more how technologically advanced they clearly are. And I think for anyone out there, just, in regards to this conversation, what we're talking about is, to keep an open mind, and just think about and just kind of reflect on what we're learning. And if you watched yesterday's live stream, if you didn't, no worries, check it out after this one. But just think about those kind of questions when we go through these articles, and learn about India and its connection to quantum physics is how much of this knowledge is knowledge that's already been known, and it's not being discovered, it's just being rediscovered. And no different than many forms of lost technology that we are still using today. The Romans created aqueducts. We have aqueducts as well. They're just not in the same design and structure that the Romans designed. So things like that. We have not reached it, which is kind of ironic, the technological capabilities to replicate many of these megalithic stone structures. We're not there yet, which is ironic. But we would then look at those people who are capable as not being as advanced because they didn't have shoes and iPhones. It's weird the way the narrative, the mainstream narrative about our ancient history is being told to us, because it's like, at one hand they're extremely intelligent, and then on the other hand they're not extremely intelligent. It's weird. It's very confounding, and I know a lot of that is purposeful. But that's just something that kind of pops into my head, and I thought I'd share before we get into it. Enough of the Ronin rant, but just something that was curious in my mind. Without further ado, let's get into it. This article was written and updated July 6, 2020 by Pierluigi Tombetti. Interesting name. Now, I will apologize in advance if I screw up any pronunciations. So I apologize in advance. But here we go. Quote, in 1929, Heisenberg spent some time in India. He began to see that the recognition of relativity and interconnectedness and impermanence as fundamental aspects of physical reality, which had been so difficult for himself and his fellow physicists, was the very basis of the Indian spiritual traditions. End quote. That was by Friedrich Kappa, Uncommon Wisdom, Flamingo, 1989. I might have to look that book up. The ancient Hindu text known as the Vedas possesses elements common to both quantum physics and the concept of synchronicity. Why? Ancient Hindu texts teaching quantum physics, the Veda, and the Upanished. Quote, the access to the Vedas is the greatest privilege this century may claim over all previous centuries. End quote. Robert Oppenheimer. Very fitting for the movie that has recently come out. The Vedas are a collection of Hindu texts gathered in 4 fundamental collections: Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda, which preserve the millenary religious wisdom of the Aryans, a population settled in northwestern India around the 20th century BC. The oldest part of the Rigveda Samhita dates back to an age between 1500 and 1200 BC. These are hymns, poems, mantras, and mythological tales written in Vedic Sanskrit, despite being counted among the oldest texts of mankind. These present extremely interesting concepts for physicists and mathematicians. Now, we're going to do a quick dive into the Vedas, but I will let you guys know that I will be doing a live stream on the origins of the Aryan race. I'm not going to tell you when. Just take a view. You'll see the notification and you'll see the thumbnail. But I think what's very fitting, and I haven't seen Oppenheimer, so I don't know if in Oppenheimer they cover or discuss any of his studies on Hindu texts. I would be very curious if they did. I would not be surprised if they didn't. But in my mind, I would figure that Christopher Nolan would be aware of that. But I don't know if maybe that type of rhetoric and information might be a little too taboo for American audiences. I'm not sure. I'm just wondering here, like, why would, and I'm honestly, I would speculate that I've seen several reviews and people talk about it. It seems like they don't talk about him studying the Vedas in relation to guiding him towards creating the atom bomb, which I think is kind of funny and not surprising, because this is typical of history. We're not gonna let people know that it was a bunch of Hindu texts that inspired a white man to create an atom bomb. It's no different than me recently learning that Hippocrates went and studied at the temple of Ahem-hotep in Egypt, and you could fundamentally just say that the basis for modern medicine came from Egypt and started from Africans. But that's a whole nother conversation, and I'm not here to trigger anybody with that. But the essence of what I'm trying to get at is that it's very telling to me that the more we study history, the more that we realize, man, we're being lied to, manipulated, and excuse me, and forced to undergo this strange trauma. And it's just sad. It's sad to see. But let's learn some more about the Vedas, because I feel that as we learn more about the Vedas, we will get a better understanding of the spiritual connection to quantum physics. And I would say, it's no surprise. I guess we could argue that they're one and the same. All right. This was updated August 22nd, 2019. The Hindu Vedas: charms, myths, and formulas for enlightenment. The Vedas are the sacred scriptures of Hinduism and are regarded as the oldest religious text in the world, thought to have been composed at least 3,500 years ago. The Vedas are a collection of hymns, magical incantations, dramatic mythological accounts, and sacred formulas for enlightenment. There are 4 Vedas: the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, Veda, and the Atharva Veda, each of which may be further subdivided into four parts: the Samhitas, the Brahmas, the Iryakas, theology, and Upanishads, philosophies. So Sumatras, hymns, the Brahmins, rituals, the Iryakas, theology, and the Upanishads, philosophies. Okay. Very interesting. Who wrote the Vedas? What are they about? While it's not entirely clear who wrote the Vedas, it is actually a non-question, as the focus has been traditionally placed on the message rather than on the messenger. Some believe that the Vedas were given directly to the sages from God and then passed down by word of mouth until it was finally codified and written down several hundred years later. Others, on the other hand, believe that the Vedas were revealed by the sages themselves. So here we have a photo that shows the Vedas being taught. Some believe the Vedas were passed to sages by gods, while others believe the messages came from the sages themselves. So the photo we have sages who look to be teaching their disciples. Generally speaking, the Vedas are composed of Hindu spiritual knowledge that can be applied to all aspects of life. The word Veda itself means wisdom, knowledge, or vision, and the social, legal, and religious customs laid out in the ancient texts continue to have an influence on the lives of Hindu believers today. However, the Vedas themselves are not commonly read even by devout followers of the religion today. The Upanishads, the Upanishads, okay, there we go. The Upanishads, on the other hand, are more popular and are often read by theology students around the world, and those are the philosophies. Rig Veda, knowledge of the hymns of praise. The oldest of the four Vedas is the Rig Veda, which means knowledge of the hymns of praise. It is also regarded as the most important Veda and has contributed greatly to other three sets of texts. The Rig Veda consists of 1,028 hymns divided into 10 books called mandalas and is used for recitation. The Rig Veda is an important source of Vedic history and many significant hymns, such as the Purusha Sukta, which gives a description of the spiritual unity of the universe, and the Nasidya Sukta, which is also known as the hymn of creation. And here we have a picture of Rig Veda manuscript in Devagandri in the early 19th century. Samaveda, knowledge of the melodies. Samaveda is used for chanting and is composed almost entirely of verses from the Rig Veda. The fundamental difference between these two Vedas is that the verses from the Rig Veda are arranged in a different way in the Sama Veda, so as to facilitate its purpose of being chanted at the Vedic sacrifices. Yajur Veda, knowledge of sacrificial formulas. Yajur Veda means knowledge of sacrificial formulas and contains exemplary prose commentaries on the way religious rites and sacrifices are to be performed. In other words, it functions as a liturgical handbook for priests. This Veda is divided into two parts, the white Yajur Veda and the black Yajur Veda. This Veda has been compared in function to the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, which I think is very interesting. The reason why I say that is because it just kind of makes you wonder, um, and it's just very interesting. Excuse me for a moment. We have the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now we have the Hindu Book of the Dead. I'm curious if there are other, cultures out there that have their own version of the Book of the Dead. What about in North mythology, up in Europe? Is there one in South America? And I think what's interesting about this is that for me, it kind of makes me wonder how deep into the Vedas did Oppenheimer go? Did he practice any forms of rituals to tap into the universe, to gain his knowledge? Very similar to like tapping into the Akashic records. What very similar to Edgar Casey, and there are many other individuals out there. I was listening to an interview on Sam Tripoli's Tinfoil Hat. I forgot the woman's name. I apologize, but she was discussing her experiences with being able to tap into the Akashic records, and I wonder if there is a possibility that Oppenheimer himself may have tapped into the Akashic records to gain his own knowledge. Just something to think about. And here we have a photo of which looks like a married couple performing a marriage ritual. And the Yajur Vedas sets out how religious rites and ceremonies are performed. The Athra Veda, knowledge of the magic formulas. The last and youngest of the four Vedas is the Athra Veda, which means knowledge of magic formulas. This Veda is named after a group of priests and is quite different from the three preceding groups of texts. The Athra Veda is more folkloristic in style and consists of charms, spells, and magical incantations. Now, we did a live stream talking about, I did one a minute ago about ancient Mesopotamian magic and ancient Mesopotamian texts that had incantations and even an exorcism spell. So I highly recommend you check that out after this live stream if you're interested in that kind of information and history and knowledge. These include spells aimed at attracting lovers, causing or preventing harm, protecting against diseases and death. Book 1, for example, has several charms against fever, a few charms against poison, and charms against worms for oneself and for one's cattle, for one's children. There are also charms that were meant to combat spiritual rather than physical illness. These include charms against possession by demons of disease and charms for driving away demons. Interesting, demons of disease. That kind of... Sorry, we got Fast and the Furious going on by outside right now. But I think what I was saying is the whole possessions by demons of disease. It kind of reminds me of Warhammer 40K. Shout out to my Warhammer lovers out there. In Warhammer 40K, you have the gods of chaos, and one of them is called Nurgle, and Nurgle is a god of disease. He's a demon god of disease. So I just, I think it's interesting that they're calling it demons of disease. And you have in this space fantasy world, you have a god of disease, which is very similar to the four horsemen and things of that nature. I just find it very fascinating when you kind of look at the similarities to our fictional stories and the similarity to our actual, religious and historical texts. You can see the inspiration and a little bit of just kind of how I like to kind of put it is like, disclosure through our entertainment, which is, no surprise, but it's for me, I kind of look at the more obscure kind of entertainment out there that people don't really know, that the modern people don't really get into, and you start really seeing some very, very interesting stuff, especially if you look into the lore of the video game series Destiny. You see a lot of similarities to things that are going on in the world and stuff like that. Can't really say too much of it because I don't really want my YouTube channel to get in trouble. So yeah, but it's very interesting. The Veda is considered by some as not belonging to the Vedas at all, although it has not been noted with that regards to the study of Vedic history and science and sociology. It is next in importance to the Rig Veda. Here we have a photo of an image of the Codex Kashminarius Folia 187 from the Athra Veda Simata. Gosh, I apologize, man. These are some tongue twisters here. But don't worry, make my tongue nice and strong for the next date. If you catch my drift. Alrighty. The importance of the Vedas apart from religion. While the Vedas are best known as a source of spiritual knowledge, they are also significant for the material knowledge they contain. The Vedas are recognized as having made much contribution to modern knowledge and science. For example, in the field of mathematics, the concept of zero, infinity, as well as decimal system have been found in the Vedas. Moreover, some of the material knowledge from the Vedas has been confirmed by modern science. These include Vedic cosmology and the use of mantras to enhance the overall well-being of the individual. Now notice where it says mantras to enhance the overall well-being of an individual. And this is something that I thoroughly believe in, and I can confirm from my own life is that what we say and what we speak, it does impact our physical and mental well-being. And I have my own mantras that I say to myself every day and during my prayers, and I see a difference in myself every time I say them, even if I have to repeat it multiple times to get it in there, because I tend to be pretty stubborn. But the point that I'm trying to make is that when it's just interesting whether you look at biblical hymns, whether it's Hindu hymns, right, whether it's Judaic, or even Islamic hymns, or in mantras. You look at for example, Rumi, who's a very famous philosopher and poet of Islam, and he has some incredible phrases and mantras. One of my favorite that he has is "Be like melting snow, wash yourself of yourself." And I feel like when you can repeat things like that to yourself, especially in particular moments or incidents, there is a a spiritual release that I feel that many of us can kind of feel and gravitate towards, kind of a almost like a little bit of a minor reset to our system. Whether you want to believe in, that this is a computer algorithm, whatever you want to believe in, how this plane of existence operates. When we have words and we have a belief system that supports and enhances our words, it makes our existence on this plane that much more navigatable, that much more pleasurable, that much more wiser, however you need it for that particular day, week, month, year. But what I'm trying to infer is that these are really important things to keep in mind, beliefs to learn from, because clearly it had some effect on Oppenheimer and he was able to create the atom bomb. How many other scientific, religious, social individuals were inspired by the Vedas that then led to further rediscoveries of ancient knowledge? I'm just saying, these are things that many people will take for granted, whether it's because it conflicts, and I put it in quotation marks, with their religious beliefs. But it's kind of ironic when you start learning that Christ may have been the reincarnation of Buddha, since Buddha predates Christianity. But I'm not here to tell you who's first, who came last, which religion is the best. My whole point is that we need to be more open-minded with our belief system and giving it better guidance and knowledge and wisdom and words that help to further our capabilities. And the reason why I keep bringing up Oppenheimer is because we know that he studied the Vedas. We know he studied these texts. What knowledge did he gain? And because of such knowledge, the aftermath cost, whether or not you want to believe that it was atom bombs that killed, I'm not here for all of that. But what I'm talking about is it gave him the knowledge. And then what was the consequences of that knowledge? His entire life was turned completely upside down. And, it's like, was it him, studying the Vedas, or was it the fact that he was having so much sex with commies that it gave him the knowledge to defeat one of the greatest axes of evil of that era? I don't know. But listen, all I know is that sometimes coochie can do incredible things to the mind. But I digress. The point that I'm trying to make here is that we as individuals, as humans, we can't take this knowledge for granted, and we can't ignore how incredible and influential this knowledge is for our mental being and our capabilities of understanding the universe. And I think for anyone out there, if you are a religious person, if you are a spiritual person, agnostic, or you don't have any care for it, fine. But at least take time to at least study it and be aware of its importance. That way, when someone says something about it that you think it's nonsense or whatever, you can't be coming out of there talking out of your ass looking foolish. And there are a lot of people that love talking out of their ass, and it makes the entire room smell awful. And that's my point right there. Enough of a Ronin rant. Let's get back into it. All right. Now we just learned about the Vedas. And here we have a picture of some of the collection of the Vedas, of Hindu texts written in Sanskrit. Now let's continue. Traditionally, it's believed that the philosophical commentaries of the Vedas, the Upanishads, date back to a period between the 9th and 2nd centuries BC. Therefore, they are seen as subsequent additions to the main corpus. In the Upanishads, we find various concepts relevant to quantum physics, from cosmology to the idea of awareness of ultimate reality and time. These include: A, Behind the stage of the world, there is a transcendent, infinite, dimensionless reality that is limited and misunderstood by human senses, which can only give a very partial and misleading idea. B. Time is perceived by the senses in a linear and limited way. Consequently, there is a wrong conceptual image of it. Hindu, Buddhist texts, etc., meditative techniques serve to manifest the true awareness of reality, free from the illusionary cognitive chains of the human being. Let's discuss number A. Behind the stage of the world, there is a transcendent, infinite, dimensionless reality that is limited and misunderstood by human senses, which can only give a very partial and misleading idea. Why do you wonder and ask yourself why, Buddhist monks, work towards enlightenment? So they can guide themselves through this transcendent, infinite, dimensionless reality. It's funny that we tend to feel and think as if this is it. When scientists down in Antarctica discovered a parallel universe of ours, except time goes backwards. Imagine living that lifestyle. But here in our reality, we have people who practice and aim towards being able to navigate such a dimensionless reality, to drink and philosophize and discuss the meaning of the world with the gods, to drink the nectar of the gods. And much of that, in my mind, is not something that is necessarily of substance to eat, but of life, of energy. And I believe firmly that when we end on this world, our spiritual journey continues, whether that is through reincarnation or means of another way. That remains to be seen. But I do believe that we as humans, we purposely and by design are limited in our beliefs of what it means to be human and what it means to live in this reality. We tend to pretend as if we are the center of the universe. And I believe that we are capable of tapping into the center of the universe, but we are not the center of the universe. We are part of it, the source, God, whatever you want to call it. But to be able to walk in that reality, you have to be of a level of mind and spirit that many of us will never be able to attain. And beforehand, we were able to. There was a time in our history of our reality where we were capable of using our brains to its full potential. There are reasons why we're not able to. Deals were made in order to allow us to maintain our capability of living on this earthly plane. And that is something that we all need to take into consideration. Not take that into consideration, then what are we doing here? What is the point? us, we walk this earth and we don't even know why. And I'm not here to tell you how to think or how to feel or what to believe. I'm just here to provide you with a bit of a challenge to your foundational beliefs. Because if we don't challenge our foundational beliefs, how are we supposed to evolve? How are we supposed to elevate and enlighten ourselves? To be able to grasp and ingest these types of ideas? And how do we and be able to implement them into our own lives, into our own belief systems? You know, and I feel that much of that is, we are being misled. I constantly tell people, don't, you don't want to meet your heroes because you may not like what you're going to see. If you want to believe in your heroes, you want to look up to them, fine. But you got to look up to the dark and the light. If you don't, then you are being foolish and you're lying to yourself. You're obfuscating part of what it means to be human, to only be placated by partial truths. And we live in a world of partial truths and misleading ideas. It's more prevalent now than ever. Look at what we are currently dealing with. Hell, they're looking at putting us through round 2. If you catch my drift, you know what I'm talking about. And further disconnecting us from our humanity, further disconnecting us from the source, from God, from religion. What do you think was the point of the last 3 years of the vacations? To further disconnect us from our reality, from our humanity, to further the transhumanistic agenda. You can look into it. And I'm not talking about the LGBTQ. I mean, that's part of it, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about them disconnecting us from humanity and creating a hive mind that's indistinguishable from their agenda. And it prevents us from being able to transcend, from being able to comprehend the infinite, for a chance to navigate the dimensionless reality behind the world stage. That's why we live in a world of half-truths and misleading ideas. Because many people are believing in ideas that are going to lead them down the path of self-immolation. And as those of us who live with eyes unclouded by hate, as those of us who live in the essential reality, we watch as those burn within the false reality. I'm sure somewhere in the Vedas you'd find similar words of mine already been spoken. But the point remains, is that even in these ancient texts, they're telling you the truth. But many don't seem to want to listen, because they prefer the half-truths and the misleading ideas. And that's what it means to live in the false reality. The Vedas here are preaching the essential reality, the true reality. Many just can't seem to see it. B. Time is perceived by the senses in a linear and limited way, and consequently, there is a wrong conceptual image of it. As I like to say, Manifestation is in synchronicity with time. And if you're enjoying your time with me thus far, please make sure to hit that like button, as it would greatly be appreciated. But what do I mean by manifestation is in synchronicity with time? Well, I mean that what we inspire for, what our belief system admires, it can determine the time in which our reality of our dreams become real. As I always say, the destination determines the journey. And for that, you must focus on what you can control amongst the chaos. And time, well, that's a tricky one. As I sit here right now, sitting for 30 minutes, you can lose a day and a half of your life. But at the same time, I believe my words are important. And I believe that they're resonating with someone out there. So for me, that manifestation is that more people are inspired and listen to my words. And sure, maybe I might lose a day and a half of my life. But hopefully I inspire someone to live a day and a half extra. Because there are many people out there right now in our current age and time that are struggling just to want to keep going. And time makes it hard to want to keep going when we're so caught up in it. But I'm trying myself to not get so caught up in time, to not always feel like I'm on the clock. Granted, this live stream was supposed to happen hours ago. Actually, I should say weeks ago. But it's happening here and now. It's going well. I'm in good spirits. We got some people in the live stream. I know right now they're hitting that like button because of how much they're enjoying this stream. I'd say it all worked out. Because I kind of gave up on trying to get on time. And I was like, I'm going to do it at this time and make sure I'm there. And I was there. I wasn't on time, but I was here. And it's going well. And, time is a weird thing. And I'll tell you about an experience I had that my mom can confirm. And she has had this exact same experience. And if anyone else has had this experience as well, please put a little clock in the comments section if you've also experienced this. So, I was running late to work. I had a flat tire. Well, it wasn't flat, but it wasn't flat, but it was getting there. I had to fill it up. Had to fill up gas tank. And I had to go to 2 different gas stations because none of them had free air. Got to one that does. And I was looking at the time and I'm like, man, I am not going to make it to work. Because I had to be at work for 3. And I'm all the way in the middle of town. And I'm like, it is 3:30. Ain't no way I'm going to make it. So I called work and I told them, hey, I am going to be late. And they're like, how far are you? And I was like, this is how far I am. All right, let us know when you get here. And I was like, alrighty. And so I pretty much was just like, all right. I was like, please get me there on time. I don't know what happened between the moment I left the gas station and when I arrived. But when I finally parked my car, I kind of just you could almost say woke up. Because I was just like, wait, what? What just happened? And I looked at the time and it said, um, it was like, it said 2:45. It said 2:45 or 3:30. It was between 3:30 and 3:45. I can't remember specifically. And I got out of my car and I'm walking in, and a coworker at the time, she looks at me and she's like, "How'd you get here so fast? We were just on the phone." And I looked at her and I was like, I don't know. I have no idea. I didn't tell her that I don't remember, because that'd be a little concerning. But I just told her I have no idea. I just got here. So I only bring up that story because of what does that mean in terms of time? Because I was on the phone with her around 3:20, and the next thing you know, I got to work between 3:30 and 3:40, and it literally, from where I was, it was going to literally take me a 30-minute drive to get there. Traffic was light. It was always light around that time, so it wasn't necessarily a concern. But like, I only bring that up because clearly, in that moment, my conception of time was altered. By who? I don't know. Was it me? I'm not sure. But I know that when I mentioned this to my mom, she was like, "Oh yeah, that's happened to me twice." I was like, "Oh, excuse me." And I asked her, and she said the exact same thing happened to me. I don't know what that necessarily means in terms of our understanding of time, or even our capabilities of tapping into time. I'm not saying that I'm a time traveler or anything like that. All I'm saying is that we really don't understand time. And you may think of my story and kind of roll your eyes, and I'd be like, well, you have every right to roll your eyes at my story. It may sound unbelievable to you. That's okay. I am sure that there is someone out there who has a similar experience and can resonate with me. And if you can, make sure you hit that like button. I know we got some people in the live stream. Please hit that like button. It would be greatly appreciated. Rumble, hit that like button. I see you guys. YouTube, hit that like button. I see you. And I can see through time, apparently. But I don't know if anyone's ever had a similar experience. All I'm saying is that for me personally, that made me kind of question, not necessarily reality, but my understanding of time, because I don't remember. After I got off the phone, all I remember, and I can just tell you, is leaving the gas station. That's the last thing I remember. And the next thing I remember after that is just parking my car and wondering, where the hell was I? And I know that we've all had that kind of thing where we're driving and you kind of go into like autopilot. You're not really thinking anything. You're just driving. I think we've all been there, but you're present, but you're just kind of driving. You're in that kind of state of drive. But me, I felt like I just kind of took a step out of time and just got there. I don't know. The way I could describe it, the way it felt, honestly, this is just me reflecting on what it felt like. It almost felt like I was in a pocket of that reality. And it just felt like I was in this pocket. That's the only way I can describe from what I experienced at that time. Was it felt like I was in a pocket, in this brief pocket, almost for a moment. It felt like, and then the next thing you know, I'm back. I'm in present reality. I'm in present time, and it just felt like a pocket, and I don't know if maybe with being in this kind of pocket of time and space, it messes with your memories. I don't know. But even when I try to reflect on that time in that moment, all I can remember is just feeling in this pocket out, but I was in at the same time. That's the only way I could describe it. Honestly, if anyone else has been through something like that, please, leave a comment, let me know. But it just made me think, really, man, we really don't know what's going on with time. And even in my area, there's a guy at the college who's working on building a time machine. So, fancy that. So, it's just something to think about. We really don't understand time, and especially if, it gets to the point where they're able to, whether it's, do teleportation, whether teleporting, items from one place to another. And I'm not talking from one planet to another, but I mean, from one continent to another. That's another kind of funny, fickle thing with time. You have people out there who are actively trying to build time machines. We have the whole idea that, some of these, UFOs or UAPs or entities are, they're coming from the future, and, the little gray aliens are us from the future. If that's an idea you want to entertain. I'm not really one for that one, but it's another one to put out there. This whole idea of even that Japanese physicist, I can't even remember his name, but he was on one of the Tonight shows, and he even brought up the idea that we could even be visited by people in the future right now. I don't know how much of that is necessarily true, plausible, or even possible, but it is something to kind of think about. There was like a famous photo from like the 1970s, and people claim it's like a time traveler. There's all sorts of stories and folklore and incidents with people who claim to be time travelers, and half the time it's either very elaborate hoaxes, other time very elaborate mockumentaries, and then there's a handful that people are just like, yeah, I don't even know. But even with the handfuls, you could probably discount them as well. But I think for all of us, time is just it's a fickle thing. I think we all battle with time, and even people who get up bright and early, who are always there on time or even a little bit early, I commend you. I'm working on that. But even then, it's like you're just constantly battling time. And even when I was back home, time is very different there. It's funny when you go to different continents, different areas of the world, whether they live on a mono or poly time. We live in a poly time here in Western society, and in other countries they live in a mono time where it's just like, hey, it is what it is. We get it done. We get it done. And when you're then living in an environment where, it's on their time, and as long as you are respectful and nice, it will get done on time. You start really seeing how time really affects our perception of reality, and how we navigate that reality and that culture or climate. And I think those of us who've traveled outside the country, or even within the country, I'm sure you go to different parts of the country, you're gonna notice the way people treat time differently. But I think overall, we are all always constantly battling time because we correlate time with our longevity. We correlate time with how long we are on this planet. How long are we going to achieve our goals, achieve this, whatever it is, succeed in that. And we correlate time with that. And we're constantly battling time to create more time for ourselves. If that makes sense. But it's kind of like asking, it would be fascinating to ask, a monk who has become enlightened, how does he compare time in our plane to time in that one? And yeah, we can say infinite and all those kind of words, but it's better to hear it from someone who's actually experienced it. And I'm sure that there are people present currently who are alive who have experienced that. And it would be fascinating to hear, their experiences and what they feel. I mean, like I said, you can, look it up online about, scientists in Antarctica discovering, parallel reality where time is going backwards. So, there in and of itself, it's like we really don't understand time, because if we have a parallel reality next to ours, which is essentially ours, but everything's going backwards in time, how are people in that reality navigating life? I think that's a really challenging and deep kind of question to ask yourself. I couldn't imagine. What does that mean? You're traveling backwards in time. What does that mean? And how does that, affect our understanding of time? Because it's just, to me, it's just interesting. It really is interesting to me. It really boggles my mind as to, I don't know, it's just fascinating to me. Time is a fascinating, it's a fickle thing, and I think for many of us out there, we spend too much time trying to control it that we lose sight of living. See, Hindu, Buddhist, etc., meditative techniques serve to manifest the true awareness of reality, free from the illusory cognitive chains of the human being. Now, as I said earlier, we have people that live in the false reality. And then we have individuals who live in the essential reality. And, I came up with this concept of the essential reality from, the teachings of the Toltec and Buddhist teachings, and even reading some books of Joseph Campbell's and the Hero's Journey, and then taking time into meditation. And I am a very strong believer and advocate for meditation, because I believe that, even for my own experiences, meditation has given me the ability to see and think more clearly and be more open with my own beliefs and interpretation and just knowledge. And it's a wonderful way to start the day, with a clear and quiet mind. And when you are someone who practices meditation, you then you're able to, break free from the chains, the hive mentality, as I like to put it, from the false reality. And the false reality is a world of domestication, a world of resistance. You're domesticated into a particular belief system, into a particular way of living, oftentimes at the detriment of your own health, mentally and physically. You see it going on right now, whether it's the alphabet community, the Marxist community. You see those people, and none of them are happy. Miserable. They're destroying their bodies with surgeries and chemicals, and you see this. And even with me, I have a friend who I've been begging to get her into meditation, because I know it would help her with her mental health, and help her clear away some of the the dangerous rhetoric and programming she has found herself spouting and believing. And that's the problem with with the false reality, is that the false reality does not allow there to be an individual. It does not allow you to be truly human. But in the essential reality, in the true awareness of reality, you're able to navigate what it means to be human. You're able to become the best version of yourself. You're able to digest the Vedas, all sorts of knowledge, and you're able to digest it and take what works best for you and apply it to your life. It's clear that the Vedas are not only a teaching of health, but a teaching of the mind, a teaching of the body. All of which are crucial in our understanding and our capabilities. And you have to think about it, to reflect and to meditate on these hymns and these poems and this folklore, to meditate and reflect on what does it mean for you, how does it guide you, how does it answer the questions that you're struggling with. And we will perceive individuals who speak with such a mentality as either being crazy or out of the box, when sometimes they're the most sane out of all of us. With meditation there comes the ability to just understand what it means to be human. I feel as if meditation is something that whether that is just instrumental in our understanding of what it means to be us and what it means to be human. And when you can look into the eyes of people, it's very telling when you look into the eyes of individuals, certain people, you can tell whether or not there's a soul, whether there's a presence, whether there's anything. And and even with people who don't necessarily meditate, but they may have other forms of practices and ideas that allow them to be in a state of meditation. Yoga is another amazing form of meditation. Exercise is another amazing form of meditation. Gardening, hiking, being outside, those are forms of meditation. And you may not necessarily be reflecting on an issue or a challenge, but you're being present, you're quieting the mind. And those are things that are healthy and strengthen your individuality, that strengthen your physicality, that strengthen your biological systems. Meditation gives you the ability to do that. I wouldn't be able to, was not capable of being able to speak and think like this if it wasn't for meditation. I started meditating first. And as I got better and more consistent with my meditation, it aided in my ability to start being more consistent and better with my workout routines, to be more consistent and better with other aspects of my life and other goals and avenues that I'm aiming towards. And that is something that's so beautiful about meditation, is that it really truly makes you a better person. And I think that's the whole point of the Vedas. And unfortunately for Oppenheimer, it made him a better person at the expense of hundreds and thousands of lives, and the final bolt in the military, corporate, pharmaceutical, industrial complex. If he knew that he was going to be getting duped into that, if he knew the ramifications of his creation, would he have completed it? I don't know. There were alternatives. I don't know. And the other alternative used bats. It's a fascinating idea, and it probably would have killed even more people. But regardless, the whole point that I'm saying is that when you meditate on knowledge, on hymns, and it doesn't have to be in Hindu texts, it can be in biblical texts, it can be whatever. If you meditate on these things, it will make you a better person, even if that means having to sit in silence and repeat that phrase, repeat that quote. These various forms of meditative practices they are instrumental in our capabilities of making us stronger people. There are plenty of studies out there of group meditations, whether it's of 20 people to even, I think, one of 1,000, and such energy that was created from such a positive meditative state. It decreased crime, it decreased blood pressure, it created longevity. Recently, this book I've been reading, The Awakened Ape, they did a study where they just had these Japanese businessmen walk an hour through the park, and it actually strengthened their immune systems 3 months after doing that study. That's the power of being outside, the power of being in nature. And imagine you do that, but you put your phone away, you turn it off, you put it on do not disturb, and you just walk in nature down the park. You just sit in nature. You don't have to think about anything. Just look at nature. And imagine the elation that will come after the fact. And even in that in itself is a form of meditation. You're just being in nature. You're being in the moment. And that is what's so beautiful about meditation, is that it teaches you how to live in the moment. To not be living in the past or trying to live in the future. It guides you to be here in the moment, in present time. And these teachings are thousands and thousands of years old. But the message still holds up. It's still good on paper. It's still capable of being practiced in reality. So why are we going to deny such knowledge? Why are we going to deny such history, such capabilities? Is it because we're afraid? Is it because we're being controlled, manipulated? A little bit of everything. But I highly recommend anyone out there, take that time and do some meditation. Take that time and learn how to live in the moment, to be present. It's a beautiful thing. It'll make you stronger and more capable. But it takes time and discipline and believing in yourself. And I know that sometimes is the hardest part. But like I say, the goal in life is to be the best version of yourself by being better than yesterday. The Vedas and contemporary physics. In fact, ancient Indian culture and the philosophy of Hinduism are intimately linked to mathematical concepts, an aspect still seen today by the natural inclination of the peoples of the Indian continent for this matter. It is no coincidence that the concept of zero was developed in this very area of the earth, and later spread by Muslims into the West. This has a close link with the search for deep reality. So before we get into it, let's learn a little bit of how Hinduism and India inspired math. This was updated September 26, 2017. 5 ways ancient India changed the world with math. It should come as no surprise that the first recorded use of the number 0, recently discovered to be made as early as the 3rd or 4th century, happened in India. Mathematics on the Indian subcontinent has a rich history going back over 3,000 years, and thrived for centuries before a similar advances were made in Europe, with its influence meanwhile spreading to China and the Middle East. As well as giving the concept of zero, Indian mathematicians made seminal contributions to the study of trigonometry, algebra, arithmetic, and negative numbers, among other areas. Perhaps the most significantly, the decimal system that we still employ worldwide today was first seen in India. The number system. As far back as 1200 BC, mathematical knowledge was being written down as part of a large body of knowledge known as the Vedas. In these texts, numbers were commonly expressed as combinations of the powers of 10. For example, 365 might be expressed as 3 hundreds, 6 tens, and 5 units, though each power of 10 was represented with a name rather than a set of symbols. It is reasonable to believe that this representation using the powers of 10 played a crucial role in the development of the decimal place value system in India. And here we have a picture of the Brahmi numerals. From the 3rd century BC, we also have written evidence of the Brahmi numerals, the precursors to modern Indian or Hindu-Arabic numeral system that most of the world uses today. Once zero was introduced, almost all the mathematical mechanics would be in place to enable ancient Indians to study higher mathematics. The concept of zero. Zero itself has a much longer history. The recently dated first recorded zeros in what is known as the Bakshali manuscript was simple placeholders, a tool to distinguish 100 from 10. Similar marks had already been seen in the Babylonian and Mayan cultures in the early centuries AD, and arguably in Sumerian mathematics as early as 3000 to 2000 BC. But only in India did the placeholder symbol for nothing progress to become a number in its own right. The advent of the concept of zero allowed numbers to be written efficiently and reliably. In turn, this allowed for effective record keeping that meant important financial calculations could be checked retroactively, ensuring the honest actions of all involved. Zero was a significant step on the route to democratization of mathematics. Carbon dating reveals Bakshali manuscript is centuries older than scholars believed. And here we have a picture of that manuscript. These accessible mechanical tools for working with mathematical concepts in combination with a strong and open scholastic and scientific culture meant that by around 600 AD, all the ingredients were in place for an explosion of mathematical discoveries in India. In comparison, these sorts of tools were not popularized in the West until the early 13th century. I don't even know what this last part is, but that's pretty much it for that. Okay. Solutions of quadratic equations. In the 7th century, the first written evidence of the rules for working with zero were formalized in the Brahma Supta Siddhanta. In this seminal text, the astronomer Brahmagupta introduced rules for solving quadratic equations, so beloved of secondary school mathematics students, and for the computing square roots. And here we have a picture of Brahmagupta. Rules for negative numbers. Brahmagupta also demonstrated rules for working with negative numbers. He referred to positive numbers as fortunes and negative numbers as debts. He wrote down rules that have been interpreted by translators as a fortune subtracted from zero is a debt, and a debt subtracted from zero is a fortune. This later statement is the same as a rule we learned in school, that if you subtract a negative number, it is the same as adding a positive number. Brahmagupta also knew that the product of the debt and the fortune is a debt. A positive number multiplied by a negative is a negative. For the large part, European mathematicians were reluctant to accept negative numbers as meaningful. Many took the view that negative numbers were absurd. They reasoned that numbers were developed for counting and questioning what you could count with negative numbers. Indian and Chinese mathematicians recognized early on that one answer to this question was debts. For example, in a primitive farming context, if one farmer owes another farmer 7 cows, then effectively the first farmer has 7 cows. If the first farmer goes out to buy some animals to repay his debt, he has to buy 7 cows to give them to the second farmer in order to bring his cow tally back to 0. From then on, every cow he buys goes to his positive total. And here we have a picture of negative cows. And of course they'd pick the brown ones. Just a little race humor. Don't get your underwear in a bunch. Basis for calculus. This reluctance to adopt negative numbers, and indeed 0, held European mathematicians back for many years. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, I'm not even sure I got that last part, was one of the first Europeans to use 0 and the negatives in a systematic way in his development of calculus in the late 17th century. Calculus is used to measure rates of changes and is important in almost every branch of science, notably underpinning many key discoveries in modern physics. And here we got a picture of Wilhelm, sporting a beautiful perm. He was beaten to it by 500 years. Seems to be an ongoing theme in Europe at the moment, but I digress. Or Western society. But an Indian mathematician, Bhaskara, had recently discovered many of Wilhelm's ideas over 500 years earlier. Bhaskara also made major contributions to algebra, arithmetic, geometry, and trigonometry. He provided many results, for example, on the solutions of certain Diophantine equations that would not be rediscovered in Europe for centuries. The Kerala School of Astronomy and Mathematics, founded by Madhava of Sangramana in the 1300s, was responsible for many firsts in mathematics, including the use of mathematical induction and some early calculus-related results. Although no systemic rules for calculus were developed by the Kerala School, its proponents first conceived of many of the results that would later be repeated in Europe, including Taylor series expansions, infinitesimals, and differentiations. The leap made in India that transformed 0 from a simple placeholder to a number in its own right indicates the mathematical enlightened culture that was flourishing on the subcontinent at a time when Europe was stuck in the Dark Ages. Although its reputation suffers from ethnocentric bias, the subcontinent was a strong mathematical heritage which it continues into the 21st century by providing key players at the forefront of every branch of mathematics. And you see, that's the thing that's funny about it, right? Is why are we? I'm sure in top tier colleges, in terms of mathematical studies, I don't know if they're teaching their students that calculus was already created by an Indian guy 500 years earlier, but we want to say that Wilhelm is the father of calculus when that's not true. And that's the whole thing when I talk about believing in the mainstream narrative. The mainstream narrative is going to tell you that this guy right here is the father of calculus, when in reality, this guy inspired calculus. So it's just these are things that we kind of have to take. This is why I'm so why I wanted to kind of touch on the impacts of India and math, because I don't know how many people knew this. I didn't know this. I definitely did not know about how they influenced um, negative numbers, or even the fact that calculus was already a thing. I didn't know that. I was under the impression that calculus was created by a white man, but now we're learning that is not the case. And that's the whole point with me about not believing the mainstream narrative, because oftentimes the mainstream narrative is going to tell you that it was all discovered by a white man, and that is not the case. And not to say that there were incredible discoveries made by white individuals. It's more of like, well, hold on, where did this discovery made by that white individual originate from? Because then oftentimes we're going to find out that it either came from Africa, or here from India. And you can argue with me on the merits of that, but you could go on Wikipedia, you can look up Herodotus, and you will find out that he studied at the Temple of Amuhotep in Egypt, and it's on Wikipedia. And a lot of people love Wikipedia, so I guess it must be true, right? And that's the whole thing. That's why I think it's so funny that people are so quick to just jump on the bandwagon and say that this is truly it. I was having this debate with my aunt, and telling her, well, slavery isn't, the whole slave trade thing isn't really true, and it's not necessarily being told in an accurate way. And and she was like, what are you talking about, and how can you not believe it? And and I was talking about the origins of the word racism, and where it originated from, with Jefferson. And she's like, oh, so you will believe. She was inadvertently calling me, like, I know someone in the live stream will argue that she wasn't calling me a white supremacist, but she was. And she was kind of saying, oh, well, you believe what the white man is telling you, and this and that. And I'm like, well, it's documented, and you can read the court case. And I didn't, in hindsight, I wish I had said this, but I'm like, you're over here telling me that I'm inadvertently a white supremacist for believing in a white person's documented information. But I'm like, you're over here regurgitating the same talking points that the white man taught you about slavery. So I mean, who's here is really believing the white man and that narrative? Because I'm over here repeating information that was taught to me by whether a black person or an African person. So so you tell me. And that's the whole thing that's so kind of funny about this, is like, even with this whole thing, we're all learning. For everyone who's in the live stream and been enjoying thus far, please hit that like button and leave a thumbs up if you've been enjoying it so far. We're all learning that India really is where modern math originated from, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we know that the narrative, the mainstream narrative, these Ivy League colleges, they're not going to tell you that. You're not going to learn that in middle school. You're not going to learn that in high school. Your math teacher is not going to tell you, okay, we're going to learn a little bit about the history of calculus. And it actually, did you guys know it actually originated in India 500 years prior to Wilhelm discovering it? They're not going to tell you that. It would be great, because then we can also then be being less ignorant and more appreciative of other cultures and their impacts on society. Because we're gonna, let's be honest here, if it wasn't for India discovering calculus and creating math, clearly Europe would still be stuck in the Stone Ages, which is kind of ironic. And if you know what's going on right now with Africa and France and Germany and those other countries, you understand how badly the white countries need the black countries. I'm not here trying to get into the whole racial politics, but it's just funny to me when we start learning the true history and the true origins of many things that we use daily or we either take for granted. And I'm not saying that we all take math for granted. We all need it. It's instrumental in our ability to function. But it's just funny to me that you're not going to hear anyone tell you, any mainstream news or anything like that. You're not going to hear any white quantum physicist. You're definitely not going to hear Neil deGrasse Tyson tell you that calculus and physics can contribute to India. He ain't going to tell you that. He's not going to tell you that. He'll tell you to get vaccinated. He'll tell you that male and female biology is just a bunch of zeros and numbers, but he won't tell you that math is in astrology and cosmology can contribute itself to India. And that's my whole point here, is that we will have all these these crazy cool mathematicians. I'm sure the Weinstein boys, they're not going to tell you that all their math and everything that they've learned and discovered is credited from India and probably is just being rediscovered and was already known, but that history and knowledge was destroyed and erased. But the whole point that I'm trying to get at is that no matter the more you learn about the origins of our history, the true history, the more you start realizing that the narrative is really a lie, and the narrative is used to dumb you down, to make you ignorant, to make you complacent. And complacent to what? To a negative mindset, to a negative, ignorant view of the world, to knowledge that hurts you rather than aids in your improvement of your well-being. And that's the whole point that I'm trying to make here when it comes to this the whole narrative of the bias. And it's like, yeah, no shit. As the more I learn, the more I realize it's like I start, pausing when I hear new information, or like, oh, well, did you know that this guy? I'm like, well, hold on. Who taught him that? Because we got to go back to where did he learn that information? Where was he inspired to create that math? And now we're realizing whether or not Wilhelm was inspired by, ancient Hindu texts that he read. The whole point is that, we have to give credit to the people who actually created the foundations for allowing a lot of these, incredible mathematicians of the past and present to be able to succeed and create their equations and their theories and all that fun jazz. But like I said, I don't know if you're going to hear the Weinstein say where the origins of math came from, or the calculus. I don't know. I know you're definitely not going to hear it from deGrasse Tyson. All right. The only reason why you're not going to hear from that because he talks so much out his ass you can barely breathe. But let's get back to the main article. Alrighty. So definitely, the mathematical notion of zero is very close to the idea of nothingness or emptiness. In the Vedas, the concept of ultimate reality is identified with the state of supreme awareness. In Brahma, in awareness in the Brahma. Okay. Brahma is the immanent, transcendent, invisible, and eternal God who has no form. And in fact, the term Shunya means either zero, empty, or nothing. By identifying with it, with identifying it with Brahma, it takes on both zero and infinite values. And here we have is a picture of the number 605 in Khmer numerals from the Sambor inscription, the earliest known material use of zero as a decimal figure. Wow. That's incredible. Quote, the multiplicity is only apparent. This is the doctrine of the Upanishads, and not of the Upanishads only. Uh, Erwin Strozinger. There we go. Another famous mathematician right there. Brahma and Atman. The Vedas support the concept of Brahman as an enormous field that constitutes the true reality of the universe and is not divided into objects with larger or smaller dimensions, but remains what is at the basis of reality, namely reality itself, even though it manifests itself in each and every form and object of the visible universe. It is without dimensions and basically coincides with the concept of quantum non-locality. It is a concept of God very different from that of other religions, especially those based on the Torah, the Quran, and the Bible. But in effect, it is not even far from it. In Brahman, there are all the planes of existence, divine, human, and infinite others, that are superior and inferior to the human plane. These are considered illusionary. Nevertheless, they are experienced as real for the living beings that inhabit them. All existence and possible worlds and the universe are therefore a way in which Brahman manifests itself. However, they are illusory in practical, unforeseen events that exist in Brahman, in power but become form and image when someone observes them. That's very similar to the experiment where they observe the was it the ion, the particle, the matter. There's an experiment, this quantum experiment, where you can where um this the matter, right? I'm if I'm butchering it, I'm wrong. I apologize, but essentially, it knows when it's being observed because it will behave differently when it's being observed and when it's not being observed. And I'm wondering if this philosophy coincides with that quantic experiment. Oh man, that's incredible. It's this is like infinite regression when the observer becomes the observed. Atman, which in Eastern philosophy can be assimilated into the individual concept of soul, identifies the subjective projection of deep reality. The Brahman, Atman, is a spiritual consciousness of the individual. However, it is nothing more than separate and an individual manifestation of Brahman itself, and to say they are ultimately the same thing. Which came first, the soul or the human? Both are defined as complementary states of awareness. While Atman manifests itself as an individual consciousness in a specific place and time and is eminent, localized, and locatable, Brahman is the transcendent state without time or size. If the Brahman, the supreme consciousness, is immaterial, shapeless, transcendent, and timeless, not localized and not locatable, the only way to perceive it is to experience this cognitive awareness. Infinite regression. Here we have a picture, a soul passing from one person to another in reincarnation. And then, and that's why when I keep on bringing up, infinite regression, it's like when the observer becomes the observed, it's no, it's similar to, reincarnation where, your soul, it goes from, becoming the observer to the observed. You're living, and And that's why when I said earlier, every journey, when you end on this plane, you're going on to the next spiritual journey, and that could be reincarnation. And whether or not that's, reincarnation of you having to learn a particular lesson, or, some kind of deal that's been made, it really depends on your perception and your belief system. But, it's, if you look at people who are able to, who have this ability to recall past lives, is that them having a moment of being the observer, and they are observing their past life. But then the same question could be the you are observing that past life, but is that past life observing your current life or your future life? And you have this regression, this infinite regression that continues to go. Just something to think about. It can be said that the fundamental teaching of the Upanishads learned by Schrödinger, 1887 to 1961, a Nobel Prize winning Austrian physicist, consists of becoming aware that there is no multiplicity, that the subdivisions into minor particles of matter is an illusion that is resolved in Brahman, and that the limited consciousness of Atman works complementary with the universal consciousness of Brahman. This implies the co-presence in every elementary particle of some degree of awareness, a condition known in Western philosophy as panpsychism. Schrödinger summed up the illusionary nature of the multiple form as, quote, "The polarity that we perceive is only an appearance, it is not real. Vedantic philosophy has thought to clarify it by a number of analogies, one of the most attractive being the many-faceted crystal, which, while showing hundreds of little pictures of what is in reality a single existent object, does not really multiply that object. The multiplicity is only apparent." Now here we have a picture of the plurality that we perceive is only an appearance, and here we have crystals for that example. So let's learn more about the panpsychism. Let's learn more about this. Okay. All right, this was updated March 6, 2019 by Jim Willis. Panpsychism, the science and philosophy of an intelligent universe. Move over survival of the fittest. Step aside gradual evolution through adaptability and random mutations. There is a new player on the scientific philosophical block. It is called panpsychism, and it threatens to challenge absolutely everything currently known about what the universe is and how it works. On the simplest level, panpsychism makes the astounding claim that the universe, rather than being a sterile backdrop in which materialistic stuff evolves and develops, is instead a web of consciousness that brought about everything that is. The way of thinking is nothing new for those who follow metaphysics and some ancient religious systems. The idea of an Akashic field has been around for a millennia, but scientists operating within the parameters of mathematics and the scientific method to give such a theory and a name and subject it to peer-reviewed papers is a breakthrough. What pantheism says is the universe itself may be self-aware. And if you heard me earlier, it's no different than whether you believe in God or you call it the source. Excuse me. I had to get a quick sip. There is merit to the idea that, it's alive in some sense. And when I brought up my story about the experience I had with time, that was me also kind of alluding and bringing up this whole idea of the universe being alive, and whether the universe at that moment decided to throw me a bone and help a brother out, that's possible. But it would be really foolish and ignorant of us to not perceive that the universe, that we live in some ways is alive. I and also believe in many ways that our planet, whether you believe in the planet or not, I'm not getting into all that, but that it in and of itself is alive. That there is an energy source within our planet that ancient civilizations were able to utilize and tap into, whether it's the ancients who built the pyramids or those who built clearly an energy to this world that can be tapped into, no different than the energy that we as humans produce. Metaphysics meets science. Zen masters for thousands of years have said that all is one. But to give this concept official sounding labels such as entanglement and proto-consciousness fields is quite shocking. It means that lines of inquiry, which have traditionally moved along two separate roads called metaphysics and science, may now have merged into one superhighway. Christoph Koch of the Allen Institute of Brain Science, a Seattle-based independent nonprofit medical research organization dedicated to accelerating the understanding of how the human brain works, has been designing experiments which define consciousness. His results indicate that biological organisms are conscious if they are capable of changing their behavior when confronted with new situations. But if a system is able to act upon its own state and, in effect, determine its own fate, it is conscious, even if it is not biological or organic. Now, there you start getting into the idea of AI. But what I find interesting here is that it says that it's capable of changing their behavior when confronted with new situations. We have many organisms, whether they're insects, fish, you name it, that we may think are not necessarily conscious because of their limitations. But if they are self-aware of their environment and know when to escape, when to leave, when to mate, those kind of things, they're conscious. And even if that consciousness is just running on default, there is still a level of consciousness there. I mean, I recently saw a video of a guy waving to an octopus that came out of one of those like aquarium where I guess it's capable for allowing octopuses to walk on the surface as well, and he's waving to this octopus and the octopus waves back. Now, pretty crazy, and I'm sure some people out there have heard about the story of the octopus that escaped its enclosure and literally escaped. It busted out. All right. It got out and it was free. Finding Dory has a character that's inspired by that event. So the reason why I was bringing that up is that octopuses are very, very peculiar animals. They are very suspect. I don't know if they're even from this planet. They might be from another planet or beyond the ice wall. But what I'm saying here in relation to this is that we have animals out there. For example, pufferfish. When they are in mating, male pufferfish. You can look this up online. It's one of the most incredible things. They make these geometric nests to attract mates, and you have to ask yourself, where on earth are pufferfish able to create geometric mathematical shapes? It's incredible. Take some time out of your day and take a peek. I think what was it? I think Planet Blue. I love nature documentaries, so if I bring up animals and things like that, it's because I spend most of my evenings watching nature documentaries. But the point that I'm saying here is that whether it's a pufferfish, male pufferfish creating these geometrical nests, whether it's octopus and their ability to be so highly self-aware of their environment and adapting to new situations and changes, it really adds to this whole idea that whether or not it was created by a god or created by an algorithm or a source, whatever it may be, or gods, whatever your belief is, you have to think about the fact that some of these animals, even if they are just running on default, but they're still able to be self-aware of their environment to an extent, whether that's intuition or just instinct, there is a level of consciousness to it. And I think that just kind of further, really makes me personally kind of like, I'm not going vegan or any of that bullshit. I love me some lamb. I bless my food before I ever consume it. But the point I'm saying is that we should start looking at different animals a little bit more with, I guess, a little more respect, even if they're the kind that just run on default. I always like to joke around with this idea that we have animals out there. For example, this type of squid, it only lives for a year. Or you look at flies, they only live for like 48 hours. Or you look at the mayfly that only lives for like 30 minutes just to mate and then die. You look at these particular animals and these species, and I always look at and wonder in terms of relation to time, how do they perceive time? Because a fly that lives for only 48 hours, for us 48 hours can be like, damn man, it's been 48 hours, it flew by. To a fly, that could be 30 years, that could be 50 years. And I just think that's just something, it just kind of popped into my head in terms of just animals and their conscious awareness. But I wonder, if we were to perceive life as a fly and live in that time frame of 48 hours, would we perceive that as being, just 2 days lickety split, or we perceive that as living a decade or two of an experience? Just something to think about. All right. Although he has yet to present his ideas in the form of a formal theory of mind, it is still a fascinating conjecture that has many theoretical physicists rereading traditional religious systems of thought and wondering if the ancients intuited what modern mathematicians have finally deduced. With more experimentation, panpsychism might produce repeatable observations that could lead to fully developed scientific theories about the nature of a universe that intentionally produced mankind. It might also help us understand man's unique place in the cosmos. Fascinating. Truly fascinating. Alrighty. Where were we? Okay, here we go. Brahman, Atman, and wave function. It's now clear the reason why the Vedas were enormous interest to the Danish physicist and Nobel Peace Prize winner Niels Bohr, 1885 to 1962, and to German theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg, 1901 to 1976, one of the fathers of quantum mechanics. In particular, the Vedic teachings finds an exact counterpart in wave function, which describes a particle in space in all its possible states, even in the past, present, and future. In other words, a particle has the potential to manifest itself in infinite states and power. Brahman coincides with wave function state of the particle, and Atman corresponds to the collapse of the wave function, i.e., when the particle is measured it will cease to be defined by the wave function to acquire one of the infinite possible states. Here we go, our boy Oppenheimer, 1904 to 1967, one of the fathers of the atomic bomb, like Albert Einstein, 1879 to 1955, read and consulted the Bhagavad Gita, a synthesis of Hinduism's deepest thoughts with a scientific approach. Quote, when I read the Bhagavad Gita and reflect about how God created this universe, everything else seems so superfluous. I maintain that the cosmic religious feeling is the strongest and noblest motive of scientific research. Albert Einstein. And I would ask you all out there, why does the Vatican have a cosmology department? I'll let you guys reflect on that. Here we have a photos of 19th century Sanskrit manuscripts of the Bhagavad Gita. The Vedas and the unified field. In physics, matter and energy are considered the expression of four fundamental forces: strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and gravity force. The classical model of physics conceives of a universe made up of energy and solid matter. The latter consists of atoms and subatomic parts, measurable and definable matter. It describes a world that corresponds to our everyday life, which is made up of blocks of matter separated in time and space and distinct from the human mind. The man therefore perceives what he sees and feels it as separate from himself. One of the achievements of quantum physics is the concept of the unified field, that is, the concept of a single field at the basis of fundamental forces. It is the initial source of everything visible in nature. However, it transcends existence. One could try to imagine it as a pure, self-sufficient field of information that has unusual characteristics encroaching on metaphysics, such as an infinite intelligence and deism. Moreover, the classic model is replaced by a completely different version, in which matter is not considered solid but simply a perturbed vibration, a sort of condensation in a large unified field. I'm sure the flat earthers are singing right now. Warren Heisenberg introduced the uncertainty principle in 1927, according to which it is possible to precisely establish the position or the trajectory of a particle, but not both at the same time, because a simple observation would produce a change. For example, if we wanted to use a microscope to observe the particle, we could magnify more and more, but in the end, to see it, we would have to illuminate it, that is, irradiate it with a beam of photons, which, possessing energy and impulse, would end up giving the particle a different motion and different energy. In other words, when an observer attempts to measure or determine the position, he introduces a change. So an observer can never be passive. The person introduces an indeterminacy. And as I was talking about earlier, the Vedas kind of talk about that. In addition, particles can sometimes take on corpuscular form and sometimes wave-like form, which makes it impossible to describe mathematically and accurately the trajectory and position of a particle. It is only possible to describe it in terms of probability amplitudes, such as a curve or field indicating a statistical probability or position and motion. Ultimately, quantum physics reveals a world completely different from the Newtonian world, made up with energy fields coming from a single unified field. This introduces an enormous novelty in many sectors of human research, since every single living being is no longer a unique and different entity from the others, but turns out to be a focal point of intelligence within the same unified field. Moreover, this state illustrates the complete interconnection among individuals and between them and the universe. A reminder of Giordano Bruno's teachings, this vision of reality constitutes a real revolution with an even wider scope than the Galilean and Copernican one because it encroaches upon the fields of morality, theology, and involves the personal sphere of thought of each individual. The Vedas, however, go one step further, teaching that the unified field from which everything is generated, including the physical laws of the universe, is pure intelligence, pure consciousness, and pure awareness. But totally awakened to itself is a pure singularity. In other words, the source from which everything is materially generated is consciousness, or universal awareness. Quote, for a parallel to the lesson of atomic theory, we must turn to those kinds of epistemological problems with which already thinkers like the Buddha and Lao Tzu have confronted when trying to harmonize our position as spectators and actors in the great drama of existence. Niels Bohr. And that, coincides with what I said earlier about infinite regression and being the observer while also being observed. Now here we have a photo of Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Buddhists are hot. I am totally going to make that my background on my phone. The concept of synchronicity, unus mutas, déjà vu, and entanglement. Carl Gustav Jung, a pupil of Freud and a great expert in Eastern spirituality, recognized the existence of particular psychic phenomenon which he called significant coincidences. These took place, for example, when one was thinking of a friend far away. At that very moment, the friend called on the phone. Some of them were so circumstantial as to suggest a coincidence linked to a precise, not random meaning. For example, Jung was taking notes on one of his patients' dreams about a particular type of beetle, and that beetle came in through the window at that exact moment. The psychologist developed a theory that these events attract each other like magnets without any actual connection because they are connected to a deeper level of the normal reality of life. It is as if they were part of two distinct universes that came into contact at that moment. P. Tobedi discusses this in Synchronicity. Flight 9941. Amazon Publishing 2020. Jung deepened this theme from 1932 thanks to the father of quantum physics, Wolfgang Pauli, who was his patient. The concept of synchronicity was born out of the meeting of these two extraordinary minds. And that's why, it coincides with what I was saying, that, as I say, manifestation is in synchronicity with time. The theory is that two synchronotic events do not fall within typical coincidences, and which occur simultaneously are related to a deeper level. They fall within the type of behavior described by quantum physics, such as the entanglement. A particle can influence another instantaneously, even if very far from it. It is a phenomenon varied and tested by several laboratories. The events that fall within the significant coincidences are therefore connected and can influence one another, as the entanglement suggests. This allowed Jung and Pauli to begin to glimpse a pattern, a sort of matrix in the chaos, as if it were the evidence of a design intrinsic to reality on several levels. It signals the existence of natural order, which connects every element of the universe. Pauli and Jung combined quantum physics with psychiatry in the concept of synchronicity. Sometimes curious events happen that are classified as mere coincidences, and sometimes the latter are so incredible that they can be part of those anomalous cases that Jung calls significant coincidences. Deja vu can be one of them. Just as physics recognizes the existence of many more dimensions and universes than we see, so Jung assumes that the events like the ones we're talking about take place when these universes come into contact. It's something behind our reality, like a stage behind the stage. And the man behind the curtain, who's behind the man behind the curtain. They called it Unus Mundus, and it had something to do with metaphysics. Jung was convinced that these coincidences, like deja vu or similar, were connected at a deeper level. A bit like frozen pinnacles emerging from the sea may appear as individual elements, but they actually are part of the same iceberg when you look deeper below the surface of the water. For example, he thought that mankind had created a huge common library where the oldest symbols resided, which he called archetypes, and the minds could be connected like everything in the universe is connected, i.e., the Akashic records. I just added that in. Subsequent experiments confirmed this vision of reality by defining it in the concept of entanglement or quantum correlation. Two subatomic particles initially interacting are placed at a great distance from each other and continue to be related. What happens to one is also observed in the other. This event has been experimentally confirmed by many scientific tests. The entanglement has very profound implications that go so far as to touch each of us, even in our most deeply rooted beliefs. This could explain, for example, how it is possible for those who believe for God to hear all of everyone's prayers simultaneous and instantly. We are all connected on an enormously deep level. Each of us acts as one and different at the same time. There is no more distance to cover. The sensory illusion. I go into the Upanishads to ask questions. Niels Bohr. Heisenberg, Oppenheimer, who studied Sanskrit to be able to read the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas in the original language, Einstein, Jung, and Pauli had somehow lifted the veil of illusion, acquiring intellectual awareness of the universe and the unified field. The reality we observe is nothing more than a great illusion that, if understood, perceived, allows the realization that we are deeply interconnected to the same unified field, or Brahman. Matter is not what we see and believe to be solid, but is formed by waves of energy. The consciousness of man can cause the wave function to collapse, and can even affect reality itself. The separation between individuals, but also between material objects, is an illusion that prevents the perception of deep reality, the awareness of the whole. As a result, time and space, but also the difference between past, present, and future, conceal each other out and become coexistent, a teaching we can find in the Hindu religious texts. Of course, one might wonder why they are so accurate. This is an important question that requires an equally exhaustive answer, which could come from ongoing multiple disciplinary research. Fascinating. Now, it ties into a couple other things that I want to look into real quick. This idea of the nature of reality and the idea of reality being alive. And this article was written May 7th, 2021 by Annie Catron. Shakespeare's Ghost Live. What secret messages do the spirits reveal about the nature of reality? And this is something that I find really interesting about what they were saying near the end. there's, I'm gonna do a live stream on it, but there was a recording that a man did, that he actually interviewed the voices from a schizophrenic, and the voice talked about how there is an entire reality that they inhabit, that these voices live in. And it reminded me of a comic book series that I have called Colder, which it literally deals with a psychotic individual who can tap into and traverse the reality of the insane. Uh, the only reason why I'm bringing this up, because when we're talking about the consciousness of the universe being alive, and how we as individuals interact with such a consciousness, and then the entities and the energies that, I guess you could say, walk between these worlds, between our reality. And I've never heard of Shakespeare's Ghosts live, this play, but it just adds to the further idea, of, I don't know if any paranormal investigators have ever asked a ghost, it's questions on the merit of reality and what plane of existence, it lives on. But it's just something to think about, and I found this really interesting, and I wanted to bring this up. When one of us began studying psychology, he was told that if the aim was to understand human relationships, it's better served by studying literature, especially Shakespeare. Since then, at least as concerns clinical psychology, the subject has moved on to become an evidence-based humanistic alternative to psychiatry's rather than mindless medical model. Yet some of Shakespeare's insights do remain unrecognized. I don't know why I said it like that. Despite all the innumerable treatises on Shakespeare, there is a near absence of any discussion of what can be inferred from his works concerning his view on the paranormal. And it's, to me, it's like, well, I don't think there's much of a difference when it comes to paranormal and quantum entanglements and quantum energy. I think there might be a little hand in hand there. Hark. Consciousness and entanglement. Most of us know the quotation from Shakespeare's, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Harturio, than are dreamt in our philosophy." Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 5. But very few scientists have actually taken this on board. So let's use this axiom to look at a fascinating area: consciousness. Now, I think it's interesting about that because I don't know if Shakespeare studied the Vedas or anything like that. I don't know. But it's obvious that this knowledge, and it goes in with synchronicity. This knowledge is out there in the ether, in the consciousness, and whether you believe in the muses or not, I do. They're obviously a tie with the muses and quantum entanglement and quantum physics, because this same idea that we're discussing right now is very similar to what the Vedas were already discussing. Okay. While there exists no accredited work integrating modern physics and psychology, there is now at least a quantum biology relating to biological molecules that show a dynamic form of entanglement, that there is a resonance with each other across time and space that is not explicable by casual laws. If entanglement is found to have perceivable role in nature, then given these forms of resonance occur in one brain, then they may well occur between separate brains suddenly. The paranormal becomes normal science. And I think that's interesting, because then Like I was saying, I don't think there's no indistinguishable between the paranormal and quantum physics, as I was saying earlier. It's just another reality. It's just another equation to solve and to communicate. Indeed, should the author and physician Larry Dowsey be right, then these developments are not just academic. They would have implications that will revolutionize modern medicine. Shakespeare's Knowing Ghosts. What does Shakespeare, whose works contain 14 ghosts, have to say on the topic? And here we have a picture of Macbeth seeing the ghost of Banquo. Shout out to Banquo. He's done dirty. In order to elevate Shakespeare's writings, it is of course necessary to take into account, real quick before we go, you have ghosts, and then you have the three witches. You have magic. You have the three witches tapping into metaphysical capabilities. Just saying. All right, back to it. In order to elevate Shakespeare's writings, it is of course necessary to take into account the zeitgeist where a deviant idea could easily lead to the dungeon, if not decapitation. The Protestant Elizabeth period, with its Renaissance, may well have offered greater freedom of expression for Shakespeare than the subsequent reign of James I. Although James was a Protestant, he was also James V of Scotland, where Calvinism and Catholicism were prevailing. Moreover, James took a very personal interest in witchcraft, because spells were to have interfered with his marriage arrangements, causing heavy storms so that his fiancee's ship, Copenhagen, ended up at the Oslo rather than Leith. Wait a minute. What? This James guy, he got in trouble for some other things involving witchcraft. Ah, man, I wish I could remember what it was. But I remember reading something about him and some other stuff that he was doing with witchcraft. Yeah, I think he wanted to go a different route, but the church forced his hand. Something like that. The North Berwick witches were accused and burned for a conspiracy involving the devil. James attended one of the trials, dismissing at first the involvement of the devil until one of the witches convinced him of her powers, unwittingly sealing her fate by telling him the precise words his fiancée had whispered into his ear. The witches in Macbeth closely resemble the depictions found in the records of the North Berwick witch trials. And there we have it, tapping into the consciousness of the world, of people. Was she necessarily a witch, or was she someone who was capable of tapping into the consciousness of the universe? Here we have a picture of suspected witches kneeling before King James. For Catholics and Calvinist sympathizers, there is one exception to seeing ghosts as agents of the devil. This was if God had a purpose in allowing the ghosts a leave of absence from purgatory. Protestants added one further, one more modern alternative: delusions of distraught minds. Hamlet was written very shortly before the ascendancy of James to the throne, and the ghosts appear only because he has a leave of absence from purgatory, and the delusion aspect plays a major role in the play. Evil spirits. The play Julius Caesar and Richard III are from the Elizabethan period. In Julius Caesar, in scene 3, or I forgot, what was that, Act 4 or 5? I'm terrible with Roman numbers, so I apologize. Brutus confronts the ghost, demanding, "Speak to me what thou art." And the answer is the evil spirit Brutus. Which is practically profound here lies in the answer, the evil spirit. This saying that while it is Brutus' own consciousness that has produced the ghost, the entity has an independence of Brutus. The entity then foretells how they will meet again at Philippa, which is where Brutus will die. And there you have, the difference between, the Brahmin and human, the connections. Even in this story, you're literally looking at, Vedic and Quantic teachings. The independence of the spirits reoccurs in Richard III. Before the Battle of Bosworth Field, when a succession of ghosts simultaneously appear, the dreams of both Richard and his adversary, Richmond. The ghosts torment Richmond but encourage Richmond in the fight by foretelling that he will become king and beget future kings. And here we have a picture of David Garrett as Richard III by William Hallgrove, 1745. This underlining idea is close that thought forms dynamic forms of thinking which can take on their own identity. Around Shakespeare's time, the Flemish physician Jan Baptist van Helmont, 1579 to 1644, was propositioning that real spirits are created by the imagination. The idea is not a culturally bound one. It occurs, for instance, in the Tibetan Buddhism as tulpas, a thought form or being created by the collective thoughts of separate individuals, which are said to be easy to create but can become autonomous and empowered. Puck, one of the central characters in Midsummer Night's Dream, seems to derive from the Irish goblin Fuka, the Welsh Paka, and the German goblin Puck, and the Scandinavian Puk. I'm not sure. I think I'm just don't quote me on the pronunciation. And here we have Puck, or Robin Goodfellow, from William Shakespeare, A Midsummer Night's Dream, 1810 to 1820, is one of Henry Folger's most sinister depictions of the character. Perhaps the most well-known example in modern Western culture of thought forms is the imaginary rabbit in the film Harvey. Harvey is a 6'4" white rabbit, Puka, from a Celtic folklore who's an imaginary friend of an eccentric. At first, Harvey is only seen by the eccentric, but soon develops his own life and others begin to see him. The tulpa can even appear as a feature of hypnosis. The Harvard-educated psychologist George Estabrooks claimed to be able to produce, through group hallucinations, an imaginary polar bear on a hospital ward, who, like Harvey, developed its own existence and its own willpower. How much of our consciousness fuels and creates our reality? Something to think about. Here we have a picture from the film Harvey of Harvey and his white rabbit. Ghosts, poltergeists, and strange disturbances. A further feature of our book, Shakespeare's Ghosts Live, From Shakespeare's Ghosts to Psychical Research, was to reclaim some of the relatively unknown accounts in rare books of spontaneous cases of ghosts and poltergeists from the Shakespearean period onwards, and compare them to modern cases. An example of a remarkable older poltergeist case took place in the 1600s in Rarwick, Scotland. 14 witnesses tell of seeing apparitions and poltergeist phenomenon: stone throwing, raps fire setting, movement of furniture, and the disturbance of animals. The case is similar to the modern Enfield case in that some of the phenomena were dangerous, if not potentially lethal. So whatever lay behind such cases of perpetrators possess extraordinary throwing skills in order to not cause serious bodily harm. That makes me think of Skywalker Ranch. How much of Skywalker Ranch is just a pocket, a tear in our pocket into another reality that influences ours and allows inconceivable entities and creatures and what have you enter our realm, and how much of that is being generated by our consciousness, our imagination. Is it that they enter our world into perceptions of what we would perceive them to be? Just something to think about. How do we explain such cases? We all know from multitasking that our sense of self is far from unitary. If part of the self is activated by destructive motives which are seen as alien to the reigning self, then during periods of religious repression and gross denial of human needs and integrity, all hell can break loose. Looking at you, DARPA. Looking at you, HARPA. Looking at you at the Hydrogen Collide machine. There are more to this. With the help of local history societies, we found cases where the ghost gave explicitly correct details of a murder. The apparition of the murdered Ann Walker in 1630 from Lumley County, Durham, appeared to an owner of a mill not far from where it correctly told the body and clothes could be found. It claimed Anna had become pregnant and murdered by a named man, who then, because of this, was brought to trial and executed. And here we have the remains of the mill at Lumley. I bet those accounts show recurrent features. Are they were mere deception and delusion? If the considerable laboratory-based evidence for existence, exacerbatory perception, is taken seriously, then there could be implications of a viable theory of what consciousness is. To sleep, to dream. Shakespeare's well-known quotation from Hamlet is fitting. To die, to sleep, purchase to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep a death what dreams may come. Neuroscientist and Nobel Prize winner Arvid Carlson speculated recently about what happens when you die. We perhaps experience something which does not have any aspect of time, a state where the brain ceases to function and which is completely freed from the experience of time. And what is this? It is a sense of eternity. Contemporary physicists is still very divided as to the ultimate nature of reality, but some leading physicists such as Max Tegmark regard consciousness as important to their theories. It is generally acknowledged that the most influential psychologist was not a psychoanalytic or a cognitive psychologist, but the philosopher William James. It was James who, through his studies of altered states of consciousness and mediumship, arrived at the conclusion that the universe is a pluralistic and consciousness as transcendental. The above Shakespeare, more things in heaven and earth, quotation has a lasting relevance. Shakespeare is the most cited person through recent history, and yet no one pays attention to his views on psychic phenomenon. Our mission is to change that. So, how much of this is really, the reason why I want to bring it up is like it really coincides with this idea of this quantum realm of entanglement, of Brahman. I mean, we're looking at this stuff from Shakespeare's play. We're seeing, in my opinion, stuff that closely resembles to what the Vedas is teaching. And where did he get that knowledge from? Like I was saying earlier, is this knowledge that is just anyone can tap into it? It's just that you have to be of a certain mindset, of a certain caliber. I don't know. But I want to continue because I got some more that connects to this. All right, this was updated June 27, 2017 by Chris Morgan. Do your eyes fool you? Ancient vision and a new reality. How to see and draw like the ancients. From the beginning of time, those among us, now called artists, have tried to capture in 2 dimensions what they saw of the real, 3-dimensional world in which they lived. Almost from the very beginning, a space, the immaterialistic stuff that envelops us, became the object of their fascination. How could they represent it? The creativity of the early Homo sapiens allowed them for the first time to paint animals on irregular walls using, for example, a depression to represent the prominent belly of a bison. The overlapping images of animals on a cavern wall allowed them to reproduce the top-down vision, which a hunter might have seen from the top of a promontory. Oh God, I'm butchering that one. Oof. As they watched the plain below them. So I have been battling all sorts of words today. I apologize. This is a photo from the Sahara, shepherds and hunters. Homo sapien was not only a sculptor but was also able to sketch on a flat surface. For this, they recreated special tools, anticipating the efforts needed to execute such designs. Now, if you watch my video on the Denisovans, you know that the Denisovans, prior to these Homo sapiens, were already creating jewelry. And I mean beautiful jewelry. So we have more pictures from the Sahara. So our ancestors manipulated and abstract concepts such as space with great skill. Our view of the way they might have lived is in part shaped by the fact that they carried this baggage of such abstract and relational concepts. It seems that this natural skill was several times lost to humanity. If, for example, we move forward to the timeline of the first mother cities of Mesopotamia around 5,000 years ago, one finds that they made no effort at all to represent physical space, at least not what we have found thus far. For this, we have to wait until the Hellenistic period when documented works began to appear in the Mediterranean basin and also further east in China. It must be noted that social organizations played a fundamental role in the aspirations of artists. The complexity of life developed together with appropriate techniques for the representation of space. In short, we can distinguish three main types of perspective: the curvilinear, the collinear, the rectilinear, and the real. These three techniques coexisted over time. Astronomy and trigonometry, the curvilinear perspective. This technique consists in using curves emanating from a singular vanishing point. We first notice the Greeks used curves to construct temples whose columns have outward towards their midpoint or zenith and are narrower or concave near ground level. We see this principle at work in some existing monuments such as Tra's column built in Rome AD 107 that followed hidden rules of trigonometry. And here we have a picture of the column. These principles of trigonometry were collected in AD 150 by Panopoly of Alexandria in the form of the table of circular arcs, originally as used by astronomers. And here we have the column of Tahar. An observer sees the bottom of the top of the frieze under the same angle. During the Renaissance, artists did not concern themselves with the principles of trigonometry. It was really not part of their training. I wonder why. Thus, they were hampered by the fact that they could not define the fugitive curves which they observed when they viewed a landscape through a window. Artistic masters such as Brunelleschi and Alberti opted instead for an approximation known as the reticular perspective, limiting their works to a narrow observational window. And here is a 15th century illustration from the Old French translation of William of Ty's History de Haute-Mer. However, many famous painters from Fouquet 1420 to 1481 to Matisse 1869 and 1954 intuitively use magnifying glass effect or a curvilinear perspective without dwelling too much on any underlying theory. And here we have The Young Sailor 1 oil canvas by Henry Matisse 1901. By royal edict, the rectilinear perspective. Alberti, by representing here in the same drawing in a view facing a grid on the left and profile view on the right, gives a method of constructing of the enlargement of squares when they are closer to the observer. The principle consists in saying that in the landscape everything converges to infinite towards a vanishing point from which start receding starlight lines. The lines of equal magnification of the objects are also straight. This technique had the advantage of simplicity. It also avoided the magnifying glass effect that was too close to the raw reality. The Genoese architect Alberti 1404 to 1472 elaborated a method showing the steps in the mapping of space. The French architect Desurgis, 1593 to 1693, developed the theorem further, showing it by a construction of the shadows cast by the sun on the floor. This is the classical system we know and which prevailed in European academics from the 18th to the middle of the 19th centuries. Now imagine if they implemented trigonometry and calculus into this, would have been a game changer. The types of drawings these artists would have been able to create. But it's remarkable that this system was not one willingly chosen by the artists themselves. It had to be imposed by a royal edict of the French king. French King Louis, I don't know, the 18th, whatever, who knows? I'm sorry. He did this in order to put an end to the tiresome polemics between the partisans of the curvilinear perspective, in particular Canon Bossuet, and those rectilinear perspectives such as Lebrun, director of the Royal Academy. Now we're getting into some political art battles. Love it. And here we have Louis, the King of France, in 1661. On their side, Chinese artists represented space with parallel lines, which does not really correspond to our psychological perception. In the picture below, the table appears as if they have shifted out of line. The overall effect is quite pleasing, if not exactly what the artist intended. Erie, 1790-1800 Japan, tea by the seaside. And you know what's interesting about this picture, and it's a Far East rectilinear parallel perspective. This one seems more interactive. You know, when you look at this Japanese version as composed to this European version up here, there's so much going on. It's chaotic. It's really constricted to just this plane, and they're building something, but it's so overwhelmingly chaotic. There's so much kind of going on. But when you look at a Japanese version of East rectilinear parallel perspective, it's more open. You feel like you can actually kind of step into the picture. I just think it's fascinating, the comparison and the implication of the Hindu influence on art in terms of the mathematical views in art and the implications. I think this is fascinating. Lessons from our eyes. The real perspective. The first systemic attempt to define the vanquishing lines and steps of magnification was that the Bayer and Flocon, who in the 1930s took note of the fact that our human perception is constructed in a spherical space of the physical eyeball. And here is a curvilinear spherical perspective by Bayer and Flocon in the 1930s. The bottle is behind the sketcher. At the same time, in 1947, M.C. Eiser, in his lithograph Above and Below, represented a patio as a cylindrical perception of space. According to his friend Bruno Urs, he used a sinusoidal arcs, repeating mathematical curves such as a sine wave, but without being aware of it. Oh, and there we have in that photo. Here is M.C. Escher up and down and above and below. And there again, we have more, Veda teachings, Gnostic teachings. It's, art and religion literally is one and the same. And art, religion, and science, it's one and the same. In 1928, David Hockney photographed the Grand Canyon of Colorado with 200 shots. He did this because he maintained that we are surrounded by a cylindrical space because of the presence of our two eyes. And here is David Hockney's photographs of the Grand Canyon all put together. Actually, wow, whoa, that is trippy. Oh, that is trippy. Wow. The present author, writing in 2002, Drawing in Real Perspective, demonstrates that in cylindrical space, the receding lines are trigonometric arcs, and the curves of constant magnification are ellipsoids. when they find again the principles of construction of the Greek temples on the column of Trajan, what appears when Leonardo da Vinci transferred a landscape through a window panel, and the magnifying effect used intuitively by Mattacci. Perspective at home. The application of this technique is actually surprisingly easy to do. All that is required is for the artist to look again with renewed attention at all the angles and curves. The neuroscience has shown us that our body is made for this task. The eye sees curves, the brain captures them. Even the movement of the joints in our arms works on these principles. When the angle meets a wall, we draw a trigonometric, i.e. curved line almost without thinking. With a little retaining, these natural curves are used to make images on paper a real perspective. After a while, it becomes considerably faster to work this way, the risk of making an error virtually non-existent. And here we have a photo of a constrained magnification of curves. And here we have another photo of magnification of curves. And this was a 3-minute drawing with practice by Xavier Boulot. The newly rediscovered techniques of real perspective, based as they are on the natural techniques determined by our physiological perception, in part returns to us in mind, set, and wondrous skill of prehistoric ancestors. And that really ties in well with when I was talking about talking about prehistoric ancestors, how they would create these incredible and these beautiful works of jewelry. It's pretty wild. Okay, I just got a wild comment in Rumble. Very, very interesting comment left in Rumble. Interesting. But let's keep on going, because I got 2 more articles to connect to all of this, and then we'll wrap it up. But I think what was also interesting about that is, like I was saying earlier, how this information is in the consciousness, it's in the life stream of our conscious, and people are tapping into it, knowingly and unknowing, that this knowledge has already been common, has already been known. It's really interesting. Now, this article is written in 2018, May 27th, by Vanamali Mataji. Maya, science, only acknowledges now what ancient sages knew about reality 5,000 years ago. Maya is a word which is very familiar to Western world, but very few know what it actually means. It is a word which is used by the rishis, sages of ancient India, to describe the nature of this universe and changing forms. The rishis have always been telling us that matter is not as real or as solid as we think. It is only an illusion projected by our senses. They call it Maya, or the magical creative power of the Brahman. Matter is energy in motion. With the dawn of the 20th century, we find that physics studied to support this view. With one swiggly of his pen, Einstein exploded the deterministic mechanical view of matter. E equals mc squared. Matter is energy in motion. This created a revolution in the mind of Western scientists. The theory of relativity showed us that we can only know the relations between objects, and quantum theory declared that we can only see probabilities. What we think of as solid matter is an illusion created by our eyes. In fact, it is the Maya, which the rishis talked about. Matter is actually made up of particles and waves that merely indicate the different types of knowledge that can be derived from that object. Therefore, modern physicists deals with the possibilities of probabilities and not with certainties. Scientists finally realize that our senses do not give us a true picture of reality. This is exactly what the rishis of ancient India have been telling us more than 5,000 years ago. Now, even then, they were already arguing and, you know, and summoning up and the argument of life and reality long before we were able even to conceptualize that idea. The science has already been settled thousands of years ago. Observation in solid state. Maya is that state when the mind confuses the myriad forms of the world and takes them for real without apprehending the underlying unity that binds them together. What gives form and purpose to the drama we enjoy on the TV is the firm, unchanging pure white screen beneath. The screen itself has no qualities. It is unmoving and unchanging, but without this solid support, the play of light and the shade which we are watching would have no form and no meaning. Similarly, the drama of our life and the drama of the world, without taking place in front of our eyes, would have no meaning without the solid stage of the steady, unchanging state of the pure consciousness of the Brahman on which it is being enacted. The quantum world, which is a strange, unbelievably dance of particles, solidifies into a semblance of concrete reality when an observation is made by someone. In the absence of an observer, the atomic world is only a possibility. The particles materialize only when we look at them. And here is a picture of an image of surface reconstruction of a clean gold surface as visualized using scanning tunneling microscopy. The individual atoms composing the material are visible. Surface reconstruction causes the surface atoms to deviate from the bulk crystal structure and arrange columns several atoms wide with a regular space pit between them. That's gold. It's so wild. Another strange fact is that when scientists looked at the location of a particle, they were able to find it at a particular place. But when they could not gauge its speed, when they wanted to gauge its speed, the particle turned into a wave and they could see it in motion. However, the scientists could not fix both its location and speed at the same time. Both depended on the observer. We cannot observe a thing without influencing it. Infinite regression. It takes us back to the truth, which had been declared by the rishis, that each of us is really creating our own world. Modern science has corroborated the statements of the rishis that this is actually a shadow world, which can be called real only when the consciousness of the observer comes into play. Normally, quantum particles act as a haphazard fashion of chaos and disorder, but when individual consciousness is focused on them, they lose their individuality and begin to act as a single unit. The coherence extends into the world. Thus, human consciousness represents the greatest form of order known in nature and can help to shape and create order in the world. In meditation, and especially in the state of samadhi, superconscious state, the brain touches the zero-point field of quantum physics, which is known as chitta in Sanskrit, in which state the brain has perfect coherence. Here we have a statue of Shiva in Conference Shiv Temple, Bangalore. The vital thing is the perception of the individual. Classical theory asserted that the observer is one who stands safely behind the glass wall and watches what goes on without participating in anything, since it was thought that the observer's view would interfere and mess up the experiment. This is impossible according to quantum physics, because we are observing and we are in the world at the exact same time. Creating our own worlds. The modern physicist corroborates the claim of the rishis that the world exists only because we who are the observers are actively participating in it. The world is a creation of the human mind. Each of us creates our own world. These worlds are used both by the Vedanta and the quantum physicists. The Vedanta says that the universe is an illusion created by the participators in this drama taking place. in the state of the universe. The Toltecs speak of the exact same thing. Vedanta says that the universe is an illusion created by the participators in this drama taking place in the stage of the universe. The Toltecs call it the dream of the planet. The 0 point state of matter is having a sea of inexhaustible energy, which is called Chitta in Hindu terminology. This is recording the medium of everything in the universe through which everything can communicate with each other. Basically, we are all connected with every single thing in the universe, right from the stars to the earthworms. In fact, we resonate with the universe. We all give off a frequency. Why do you think the whole term "don't kill my vibe" came from? Unchangeable in the world. The question now comes up as to how the supreme unchangeable being of the Brahman turned into the changing world. Vedanta explains this unique phenomenon by postulating Maya as the cause of superimposition. Maya has two powers, one to veil and the other to project. It veils the nature of Brahman and projects polarities on the scene of the non-dual. We can understand this only through examples. Light exists, darkness does not. The latter is only the absence of the former. Although darkness does not exist in reality, it has empirical existence. Similarly, the world also has empirical reality. According to the theory of relativity, continuous activity is the very essence of matter. Hence, in Hinduism, Maya is described as a state of becoming, whereas Brahm is the state of being. The Purans describe the relationship in a very poetic way. Shiva in his essence to the absolute and is known as Bhava or being, whereas the consort Bhavati is the essence of Maya, is known as the Brahmani or becoming. There can be no change without expenditure of energy. The Sanskrit word of energy is Shakti. This also refers to Maya, as we have seen. Hinduism, with its genius for personification, says that Shakti is the feminine principle of Brahman, and so coexistence with it. It is a principle of action through which the inert Brahman appears to project itself into the multifarious forms of the world. Each god of the Trinity has its own Shakti, Shiva and Parvati, Lakshmi and Narayana, Brahma and Saraswati. Thus, we find that scientific facts are nearly interwoven into the stories of the Puranans. Here we have a photo of the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, the wedding of the charming one. Maya as one. Maya is thus the enchantress who has cast a spell on us and made us believe in the solid reality of the universe of forms. She has made us believe in the reality of the forms and forgot that the formless that is upholding the forms. The only way to break free from the spell of the enchantress is to realize that all the forms we see are aspects of one reality, just as all the rays of light emanate just from one sun. This is known as moksha, or liberation, and is the goal of Hinduism. Liberation is when the individual experiences that he or she is nothing but that Brahman. That is the very essence of Hinduism. This experience is possible only because the essence of that pure consciousness is embedded in the very core of the human being. The Upanishads have already told us that the Atman, individual soul, equals the Brahman or the cosmic soul. The true nature of that consciousness is revealed to us only when Maya is removed from the mind through perception. Many different types of yogas are given in Hinduism in order to realize this all-important fact. They all attempt to unite the many with one. Thus, all yoga is an attempt by the human mind to free itself from the clutches of Maya and experience the liberating unity of Brahm. Overcoming Maya. The sage Aruchalalan, known as the Raman Maharishi, advocated the method as self-inquiry in order to remove the veil of Maya. Who am I? Is the question that he asked his disciples to use. By negating all of those parts of ourselves that are transitionary or superficial, we will come to the realization that we are nothing other than that supreme consciousness of Brahman. This is the final liberation form of all the fears that haunt the mind of the human being. If this knowledge is made a part of our everyday life, all our basic hang-ups like the fear of death, extreme attachment to people, places, and objects can be banished forever. Our inquiry into the true nature of ourselves will make us realize that the Supreme Self is present in all beings irrespective of any perceived differences. Meditation and yoga can only give us occasional glimpses of that Supreme Self, but the abiding knowledge and realization that our existence is not separate from the universal existence can at one stroke remove all mental agonies. This can only be achieved through sustained self-inquiry. This is the only way by which we can achieve a victory over the complementary illusionor, yet totally powerful state known as Maya. Tat Sat. Now, if you remember what we talked about in number that it was A, B, and C, talked about the importance of meditation. Now you're seeing how all of this is coinciding with quantum physics, and how in many ways, quantum physics, quantum entanglement, it's all part of our spiritual entanglement. It's all part of, our spiritual and hero's journey, as I like to put it. Much love to everyone who's in the live stream. Shout out to Rumble. Hit that like button. I appreciate we got a new subscriber on Rumble. Thank you very much. Shout out to YouTube as well. Appreciate you guys. If anyone is watching over at Twitch, shout out to you as well. You're seeing this here for you guys in real time. How, the more you try to disconnect yourself from the spiritual, the less you're becoming human. And it's right there in front of us. What we're learning and what we're learning here with the Hindu text and quantum physics is that it's way more than what we thought. It's way more than just math. It's life. It's being. It's truth. Here we go. All right. This was written and updated January 30th, 2013 by April Holloway. The Hindu Sacred Texts About Human Origins. Third in the list of major religions, with more than 870 million followers, is Hinduism. Hinduism goes back to 500 BCE, is a compilation of many diverse traditions, in contrast to Christianity and Muslim traditions, both of which emerged from a single founder, making it the oldest practiced religion, closely related to that of Jainism, Sikhism, and Buddhism. The religion-gained body of texts are referred to as the Veda, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. There are many different Hindu creation stories. References to a first world or universe won't be found. Also, though the belief in one supreme God is common, Hindu texts consider all deities to be extensions of this God. Lord Brahm is the creator of the universe and the first in the triumvirate. The other two gods comprising the triumvirate are Vishnu, who sustains the creation, Shiva, the destroyer of the evil. These three gods form the supreme one, who is behind all creation and destruction. mind, body, and soul. And these gods created and destroyed the universes continuously. The length of time which a process takes is uncountable. However, one day for Brahm is considered 4 billion years for us. Also, according to the Hindu text, whenever Brahm sleeps, the world is destroyed, and every morning when he wakes, it is created again. Brahm creates human beings and all life. All different species come out from different parts of Brahm's body. He created man as the first of the animals and the strongest. He created him from his soul. One of the stories mentions that Brahm splits himself into two to create male and female. In other texts, the Prabhajapti, a group of deities, the sons of Brahm, are said to be creating all living beings, both gods and mortal creatures. Sounds very similar to the Anunnaki. The concept of God in Hinduism is exceptionally complex and varies according to different philosophies and traditions. Generally, gods in Hinduism appear more like supreme personal beings. Devas, a word for deity, can easily be conveyed as supernatural beings, and according to Hindu texts, there are 33 in the celestial world. 33 Masons. However, an interesting concept mentioned by one of the creation hymns, Nasadya Sutka, is that the creation of the universe came first and gods afterwards. Still, since Hindu texts do not state one clear origin of everything, the creation tradition in Hinduism is a little bit obscure. Fascinating. And what I find really interesting about this and is how it says that the universe was created first and then the gods were second. And it's like, okay, and it kind of coincides with what I feel is that the universe in and of itself is a being. It is a entity. It is alive. And from such creation comes what follows would be the gods and humanity and whatever else. Bless you. That's my old man, Pops. He's having a snoozing fit at the moment. But what was so fascinating and wonderful about this, in my opinion, was just the realization that some of my own beliefs and thoughts have just kind of been confirmed and have been, you could say, have given more of a strengthening in my foundations of my beliefs. And I hope for anyone else out there who have taken the time to listen and have been enjoying thus far, perhaps you yourself have learned a little bit about your own belief system, and maybe you found something that challenged your foundations of your belief system. For me, a lot of things were just reaffirmed and kind of revitalized a bit. And I think for all of us, I hope that after this, you take some time and you do some deep dives into your own belief systems and into into much of the information that we have just gone over. Yes, a lot of it was definitely dense, but it was beautiful and it was creative and it was interesting, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think for any of us out there, you don't have to be a mathematician to appreciate the beauties and wonders of quantum physics and quantum and mechanics and entanglement. You just have to have a love for life and all the wonders, and there you will be amidst, the quantum entanglements that the mathematicians and the scientists dabble with each and every day. But I want to just say I really appreciate everyone who stuck by me through this long stream. Like I said, we were going to be doing a deep dive, and when we do a deep dive, we do a deep dive. And we every now and then we'll come back up for air, but we got to keep going further and further. So I really appreciate everyone that stopped by. Before we wrap up, please make sure you hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe, and make sure you share this stream. Love to Rumble and everyone who is watching our Rumble. Really appreciate you guys stopping by and taking time to listen. I hope you guys have a wonderful start to your week. Shout out to everyone on YouTube. I hope you have a wonderful start to your week, and take some time and reflect on what it means to be human, and what it means to have a conscious experience. You don't have to go too deep as we've done today, but take a walk through the woods, sit in silence, take a moment, be present, and reflect. And you just might be surprised what you uncover. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Ronin. All things, everything. And if you made it this far and you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that notification bell. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.